Hi guys, welcome to the this video on rules for creating variables and variable names. Initially, we did an introduction of variables and data types with Python. Now we're doing the follow-up where we're going to be looking at rules for creating variables and variable names. If you haven't seen the previous video, I recommend you check out the video before this, and you see variables and data types. Now, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be looking at rules we should follow when creating variables in Python. Now, it's important when building blocks for Python codes that you follow certain guidelines. These guidelines or rules, if not followed, will cause errors. Of course, it's important to note that not all the rules broken will cause errors, but then there are some illogical errors you are going to be getting, or some confusion that may come up, and it's ideal to highlight this when learning Python. So the first rule we are going to be working with, I'll have to document it this way. Call it the first rule is we need to understand that variable names can only contain letters, numbers, and underscores. So variable names can only contain letters, numbers, and underscores. Now, for this to happen, we have to bear in mind that variables, you cannot create a variable starting with a number, right? That shouldn't happen, right? So here, let's state that, you you cannot create a variable starting with a number. So yeah, right. So we're going to show examples for what this is. So now, if the first variable we're going to be creating, which we've already created, first underscore var, so we might as well just follow a sequence. Now, if I choose to create a variable, which is the first rule, I can start off like this. So which means it has letters, underscores, and it has numbers. Right, so this makes for an ideal variable name. So here I will say, I'll call this so I put a string inside of it, a series of letters and characters. So then this works, right? So I want to always, make it a habit to document properly. Let me see. Yeah, creating a variable. Right. Then, so we need to break this rule so as to show, so that the learner can understand what would go wrong if this rule was, torn apart. So again, in breaking this rule, I'll start off by saying second underscore code, right? Then now I try to create this by saying, I'll call this tearing apart. Now, once I do that, I call this breaking a rule, breaking a variable naming rule. Now, so once we do this and then we run this code here, oh, you see that it tells us invalid decimal literal. In fact, we could just basically do this, right? And then we'll still run it. Then you see that it's an invalid syntax, right? Because you cannot create a variable starting with a number. Of course, you can create a variable starting with an underscore. So I can basically do this, call this 2 underscore second. Then call this trying again. And I call this making up the rules. And so I run this again and you can see that this works. So yeah, we've looked at this rule. You can see that the first rule, we try as much as we can. Not that we try, we did. We created a variable starting with a letter and a character using the underscore here, then 2, and this works. It works. In fact, for us to prove that it works, of course, they did not throw up an error, but we use the print statement to print to string, and we have second 2, and we trying out the second time. Then we broke the rule. We created a variable starting with a number, and I mean, it's, of course, it's let us know that that's wrong. The interpreter threw up an error, and you can see what we have here. Then finally, we looked at, making up for the rule, and then we created this, and if I print underscore 2 seconds here, and that works. So again, to buttress the fact that learning Python is about rules. You follow certain rules, and these rules make it easier for you to, build these blocks of code that end up in your Python program. And yeah, so that's what we are trying to show here, that Python has rules, especially when creating variables and variable names. In the next video, we're going to talk about another rule, and it will be interesting to know what that rule is all about. If you want to know what that rule is all about, there's a tongue twister there. Join me in the next video. I'm going to call that maybe the part 3 of creating rules and variables. So, yep, join me then.